And now a message from our friends at Fetching Food.
The 1970s and 80s had Elbow, Gravy Train, Purina, Meow Mix, and Bell Bottoms. You've changed your clothes, now change how you feed your pet. Like Bell Bottoms, kick the kibble and join us in the 21st century with the healthiest diet for dogs and cats. Feed naturally, feed raw, feed Fetching Foods.
Hello, pups and kittens, and welcome to another fun-filled and exciting episode of the Groomer Next Door podcast. I'm your host, Chris Green, and joining us this week, she's an author, she's a podcaster, she's an extraordinaire. We are joined by Amy Shojai, and I can't even begin to tell you how excited I am and absolutely tickled that I get to share this with all of you. She is so amazing. Not only is her work absolutely top-notch, best author out there, now on my list of favorite authors out there, but she's just so sweet. I never know what to expect. I really don't. And when I'm lucky enough to just be able to be in the presence of such amazing talent and just a great person, I have to share it with all of you. I just can't help it because it's very far in between. And lucky, I really will say, I am lucky because I do get that opportunity. And I would say 99.9% of people who have been through this podcast have been phenomenal. Amy is absolutely a doll, and you guys are all going to enjoy her as soon as she enters the podcast studio. But before then, let's go into our fact of the week. Because we have an author on, I wanted to tailor this fact of the week in her realm. The first book ever written using a typewriter was The Adventures of Tom Sawyer. And because it was such a short fact, I thought I'll throw an extra one in, and that is President Theodore Roosevelt read one book per day. Wow, it's dedication. I really, honestly, I can only get through a book if it's audio because I'm always on the go. Whether at work where I'm just always moving or driving somewhere or even at a practice for Claire, I really have to have some kind of way of digesting good information. So I guess I could do the same thing, but audiobooks weren't around then. So oddly enough. Well, by that sound, Amy is about to enter the podcast studio. So with that said, welcome Amy Shojai to the podcast.
Oh, hello. Hold on a sec. Dad, we have a guest on the podcast.
Wow, this week on the podcast, I'm joined by an absolute all-around brilliant lady, and I'm going to shut up and just intro her in and let her go. We are joined by author, podcaster, extraordinaire, Amy Shojai. If I hopefully said that exactly correctly, I'm still hoping. Thank you for being on the podcast.
Yes, that was perfect.
Oh, thank God.
Much better than D. As I told you before we started, I was mispronouncing it on TV. When I was first married, it was very, very embarrassing. So I tell people I answer to "Hey you."
I do too, actually. Most of the people actually just go, hey. Yes, what can I do for you? Well, I always like to start off every episode with the beginnings. I love origin stories. And how did you get into being an author? How did you become who you are today?
Wow, you start really good. Okay, in the beginning, I was working at a small veterinary clinic in eastern Kentucky, and we had it was eastern Tennessee was where I first started, and there were no jobs available. My husband and I had just gotten married. We had just moved to this small town there were no jobs available until this veterinarian had graduated school, came back to his hometown and opened a business, and I interviewed for the job. And my interview, incidentally, was during a Chihuahua's C-section. And so he was handing out puppies to me to resuscitate as he asked me questions. And I think I got the job because I didn't pass out. As a result of that, he was so excited about sharing veterinary medicine, and I was just eager to learn. That was kind of the beginning, and I started just absorbing all that I could. I've been a lifelong pet lover. When I was growing up, my mom said that when Amy grows up, she won't have babies. She'll have puppy dogs and kitty cats, and Mom was right. So this was a match made in heaven, and I learned so much, and there were all of these wonderful stories that I would tell my family and my friends, and my mom, again, it's my mom's fault. She would say, Amy, you have to write these down. And so I did. I started writing personal experience stories, and this was back in the day when print magazines were all, and so I was submitting these article ideas, my personal experience stories about the Chihuahua C-section and, the dog that ran away from home and had a frostbitten tail, and all of these exciting and heartbreaking and uplifting stories. And lo and behold, after a gazillion rejections, I had an editor take pity on me and tell me what I was doing wrong. And after that, I sold probably 6 or 7 in a row to that same editor. This was Dog Fancy magazine back in the day. And that was kind of the beginning. From then on, I learned that I had a talent for translating what I called medicalese into the language that you and I can understand, because I didn't have a degree in veterinary science or any of that. I was learning on the job. And I was very fortunate that Dr. Joel Saylor at the time loved teaching. And so I learned so much. I got to assist in surgeries. I got to observe a lot of things. There was a hit-by-car dog that came in that he had to do open heart massage on. That was a story that I ended up publishing later on. Dog survived miraculously. All of these different types of stories that really trained me as a writer. And eventually I started becoming good enough at what I was doing and learning what the magazines wanted and what readers wanted. And that's key, really, when you're a writer, is satisfying it, identifying who your audience is and giving them what they want. And hopefully it's the same thing that you want.
Right.
And so from there, then I started getting assignments, and my first book offer came from an editor in New York that had already sold a book idea but didn't have a writer for it yet. And she read some of my articles in one of the pet magazines and called me out of the blue. And it took me about 30 seconds or so to say, yes, I'll write it, yes. And that was the beginning. I think the first book was published in 1992.
Well,
so I'm an old cat.
No. But that's okay. We'll go with it now.
Well, it's not my ninth life yet, so.
I mean, that's still, you can think back to, I always love this, when you can pinpoint a moment in time when that's when my life really changed. And that was just, I went in for a job, and here I'm being handed puppies to massage. That's, wow. How, yeah, and I agree, you probably did get the job because you didn't pass out, but C-section, puppies, everything's coming everywhere. It's like, wow, that would just be amazing to be part of, but that really was the opening.
It was life-changing.
Yeah.
It was life-changing because, to see that mama dog on her back blinking her eyes because she was sedated heavily and felt no pain, but she was still awake because if they sedated too much, it would sedate the puppies and they might not start breathing. So even from that very moment of that interview, I started learning things. And so it was a wonderful time in my life. It was a time when it was before email. It was all snail mail. My husband was not thrilled at the amount of money I was spending on postage because, we were newlyweds. We were struggling as many young marrieds do. Mm-hmm. And I wasn't making any money at it. I mean, an article at that time, I was lucky to get maybe $75 for an article. And when it went up to $125, I was in gravy. And it was really kind of a question. The only reason I was able to do some of that was because there weren't any other jobs out there. Now, when we moved and I got a, quote, real job, then trying to write the articles, and I had graduated from the personal experience stories to more substantive stories where I interviewed experts. I would go early in the morning before my job and interview my veterinarian and put him on tape, ask him all the questions. He would loan me veterinary journals with references, and so I would have citations because I wasn't an expert. I was being a reporter, and I was interviewing all the experts. And so that was kind of the next step in that. And that's what led later on to the books, because I absolutely love research. Mm-hmm. That's the problem with writing a nonfiction book, is when do you stop researching and you actually begin writing? When do you say it's done? Because there's always something else you can find. It's so exciting.
Very true. That would be. I'm with you. I love research. That's where it's part of the fun of all of it, is you get to learn so much about somebody or whatever it is that you're working on, and you're like, really,
yeah.
really, and you almost don't want to really stop. That's the part. It's because you're trying to get into the person's head, in a sense.
Exactly.
Oh man.
And the thing was, early on, I'm talking about, in the bygone days, you didn't have email. It was all phone, by phone. It was telephone tag. And so I did a lot of my phone interviews from, I live in Texas. I would do them from California because of the time difference, because I could catch people. I would come home on my lunch hour and call and do my interviews. And then after work, I would transcribe, and I would write my articles until 10 or 11 o'clock at night. So basically, I was doing two jobs at the time. And to get the trust, to acquire the trust of these brilliant veterinary researchers was amazing to me. I mean, these were my heroes. These were people that discovered feline leukemia, that helped develop the virus for it, that identified feline infectious peritonitis, that were doing the research into vaccinations and all of those updates, and the people that were, the movers and shakers in the pet industry. It was amazing that I could dial up somebody from one of the major pet food companies and have one of their nutritionists call me back and talk to me. It was just absolutely amazing. They would send me books that had all of their references and the research. It was like I was talking to the giants.
Right.
And it took only a couple of times, because they talk with each other. It took only a couple of times of interviewing them and having them see the result to gain the trust. Because oftentimes they don't want to be misquoted, and I understand that. So I was always very careful and very respectful of that. And the other trick, if there are folks listening that want to do this kind of research and this kind of reporting, there is a trick to finding the next expert. And that is the final question you ask during an interview is, who else would be really important for me to talk to about this? Then they give you a reference to a colleague or a friend. And when you call that person or you email that person now, you can say, so-and-so said that I should talk with you. You've got an immediate in.
I'm not gonna argue it, because that's exactly how it happens for me as well. So
yes.
I agree with that completely it does work. You know, I grew up. I was born in '81, so I got to see all the enjoyments of that you're talking about, and I do, in some sense, I do miss some of that. The hardships that it was just to try to get in touch with somebody. You couldn't just pick up a phone that was in your pocket and Google something. Can you just imagine how easy life would have been for us?
Oh,
but,
yeah.
But now it's like, do you ever think back and go, I kind of wish it was that hard, because it was the chase that sometimes was more fun.
Some of it was, and when you were looking for a particular bit of information, you would find other things that you didn't even know existed that take you down a whole other rabbit hole. So it was this never-ending chain. And I didn't have email for a long time. I mean, a lot of people had it before I did, because my husband's a scientist. My husband's an engineer, and he said, email is for engineers, it's for work, it's not for stuff at home. Until finally it was like, come on, we got to have. So he put together my first computer.
Oh, wow.
He ordered all the components and put it all together. It was one of those things with a 5.5-inch floppy disk. It sounded like a train running, when it's.
Yes.
And it stopped working, and we took it apart and discovered mice had gathered all of our German Shepherd shed fur and built a nest inside. But I wrote my first books on that thing. So with the dot matrix printer and all of that stuff and today, oh yeah, you don't know how good you got it today. But yeah, seriously, the internet was a wonderful tool. It also nearly put me out of business.
I believe it.
Because anybody can, the type of nonfiction books I wrote and continue to write, very prescriptive, how-to, based on science, based on these experts. And suddenly, anybody could just dial up and ask Dr. Google, and it didn't matter if it was good information or wrong or right. And there was no way to tell, but it was free.
Right.
And publishers no longer wanted to purchase my books. They said nobody's going to buy them. And so there was a time there where I did. I gave up writing for a while and took another real job, and I was teaching high school choir for a while until I discovered that, I love teaching, but I love writing more. Yeah,
I can see that. I can see where that would be. I mean, just being able to get the words out of your brain onto, even though I know it's on the screen, but it's still in a sense on paper. It's so difficult to articulate that to a lot of people. I've got all these thoughts in my mind. They need to be expelled. How do you do it? And that's kind of where that would come into be a very, very big, difficult dilemma to have to deal with. So I couldn't do it.
I think a lot of creative people are like that, whether it is, and I think also I've met enough creative people that I've learned, if they are writers or if they are artists or if they are singers or performers or podcasters, they are creative in more than one area. And if you cannot get your art out there in one venue, then you're going to find another way, or else you're going to explode in some way. So, and art feeds art. I mean, if I can't, I couldn't write for a while, so I taught music. And music is another of the arts. And then, I took a break from writing. I did stained glass. I do theater and perform. All of it feeds into each other. So one inspires something else. I actually, with a co-writer, we wrote a musical theater play that has been produced several times now, Strays the Musical. And it is, all the characters in it, all of the actors are cats and dogs looking for homes. So all of this comes back to the muse that's in you. What you have to love it first, or the audience won't like it. Don't write to what's popular. Write what makes you smile. What makes you thrill. I mean, when I finally decided went back and wrote fiction, my first thriller novel. I wrote the book I had always wanted to read and couldn't find, so I wrote it.
And
lo and behold, people read it and loved it, so I wrote 2 more, and I'm working on the 4th one in the series.
yeah, I wanted to go over that thriller box set. We'll go over that in a bit because I definitely have questions on that one. That is just absolutely a cool concept, and even the fact that the way you actually titled each one, I'm definitely curious.
Okay.
Don't worry, we're getting into your literature. There is definitely a lot of curiosity and intrigue on my side. I always, again, another thing I love to do is I love to really understand somebody from a side that, and you've done press from the best of the best. And like I told you before, you're not there. That's not what I am. But I do enjoy learning things about people. And one of the things that, especially with somebody with a very similar brain as mine, that it seems to create until everything's out, and then you have that mental exhaustion, like, thank God it's done. But I'm always curious, what is a guilty pleasure? Do you have something that you just go, oh, I'm so sad. I like it, but it feeds me.
Oh, guilty pleasures. Do Cheetos and M&Ms count?
Yeah, I mean, they do.
Well, what I would love to do if I didn't have any deadlines and I had nothing tugging at me, oh, you've got to do this, you've got to do that, I would love to just sit down with a book outside in my garden with my roses and my cat on my lap and a dog at my feet and read. That would be bliss. And hopefully we will be adding to our pet family in this next year. Currently we have Karma Cat, and he's kind of my delinquent kitty. He's 4 years old now, but we lost 2 of our pets this past fall. So Saren Kitty was she would have been 22 in February. She was my little foundling Siamese wannabe, and she ruled the roost. And we lost our German Shepherd.
Oh, I love German Shepherds.
Yeah, and we lost him in September, and he was best friends with Karma. So Karma was in mourning along with us. He slept with his collar for 2 weeks.
Oh, wow.
And so we will be, hopefully we will be having some new furry family members sometime this year. We don't have any specific plans right now, but house still feels a little empty, even though Karma's doing his best to manage me. And he likes to sleep across the keyboard, but that's probably my brain candy is playing with the cats and reading for pleasure and not for research.
Now I personally, there's a 2-part to this. I'm seeing a children's book with both of your cat and your shepherd being the main characters. I don't know why I see that coming around in the future. And that's, again, a nice way to be able to mourn in another way. I've heard different people say, I take my art and I use it this way, so I can see that happening. And the other part is it difficult to read other people's work and just think, this is just, I would have done it so much better, or why did you go this way? I mean, does that ever happen to you?
Well, let's to go back to the children's book first. That's an interesting concept, but I don't write for kids because kids are too difficult an audience.
True.
They're really hard, and since I don't have 2-legged children of my own, I bow to those who do and do it very well. But I do, in fact, in my thrillers, I have dog viewpoint. And so that's something that in the old days, they told me that you can't do that because that's only for kids' books. But it was the book that I always wanted to read. And so I did that, and it's been very popular. As far as reading in somebody else's book and you're thinking I could do it better, that I think as writers, when you're first starting out, that may actually inspire you to go ahead and sit down at the typewriter or the keyboard and start writing. You say, I could do as good as them. They published this tripe. I can do better than that. So that may be the inspiration. But today, if I'm reading a book, I give myself permission now to stop reading. I never used to. But life's too short. So if I read a book that I can't get into or for whatever reason it's not striking a chord with me, I stop reading it. The reading that I love is books that you get lost in, and you forget you're reading a book. You're in another world. And I have so many author friends who are brilliant. They're so much better writers than I am, and I aspire to be them. And I read theirs. Sometimes it's hard to do. I will try to analyze some of the books that I've read several times and see, well, how did they do that? But it's hard to do because you get sucked into the story, and that's the brilliance of being a great storyteller.
It is. You know, it's funny because as somebody who has their own kind of world of characters, I put mine in different ways. Mine might go up every day in a comic strip that I put up on our Facebook page, and again, you can't do that it's only a children's to have any kind of dog or cat as a character, which I always found to be so stupid. Such almost being handcuffed as an artist.
Right.
And I never really understood that.
Well, and today, it used to be the publishers and the agents and whoever else had the power to publish it or to offer it. They were, I don't like the term anymore, the gatekeepers, but for whatever it's worth, they were the deciding factor. And that was the only way you could get published unless you self-published. And that used to have kind of a bad connotation. It was vanity to do that. That's not the case anymore. And there are many, many authors now who were told for years, this book won't sell for XYZ reason. That one won't sell for whatever reason. And they went ahead and did it on their own, and they found their audience. Publishers don't have a handle on what readers really want. They know what has sold before, but they don't know what new will strike a chord.
Right.
Harry Potter had never been done before. And that was something that was just, she was rejected by many, many publishing houses before Scholastic picked up that first one. And the kids sold the book. They shared that book in schoolyards. So if you want to have cartoons with animal voices, I mean, that's huge right now. Garfield is huge. I mean, there's no restrictions now. If you want to make a living at it, it may take you some time to establish and to find an audience. But if you like it and you're passionate about it, chances are there are others just like you that are going to love the same thing. And people respond to the passion of the artist. So if you do it with passion, you're going to find an audience.
I'll say this: Jim Davis was, and probably will always be, my all-time hero. I mean, I love Garfield to this day. I've never been able to meet him, never talked to him, but he's definitely on my list of just I loved Garfield. That was huge. I mean, John Arbuckle was the first character I could draw to almost perfect, and on a tangent, I would just go nuts over that. So I get it. But it's weird because you have to have that creative voice, and that voice comes from upstairs, and not everybody's able to be as fortunate to be able to get it out there. And here we'll go back to the whole back to the 90s, even 2000s. I would say even last maybe 6-7 years it changed a little bit, but they did hold it. All publishers held everybody to a certain thing. Well, we can deny anything, and it could have been great, and yet it would have been denied. Like J.K. Rowling.
Oh yeah.
I mean, who would ever have thought that was going to be a massive hit? And look at what it is, and I love it. So
well, even in the nonfiction realm, Chicken Soup for the Soul was rejected from everybody. It's a dynasty now. My goodness.
Right.
So you really have to have the gumption to believe in yourself before anyone else will believe in you.
Right.
And if you need to do it, there are tools today. You can self-publish and do a fine job with it. Now, it's difficult. It is not easy to self-publish. It's not the shorthand route. And we talked a little bit before we started recording that in the old days, the publishing it took a long time. It took 18 months from contract to get it published, and longer than that. Sometimes to sell the book. Today, you don't have that restriction, but you still, if you are not backed by a publisher, you have to find and pay an editor. You have to pay or learn to do book design yourself. You have to find a cover artist. So all of those things go into that because everybody has an idea.
Right.
But getting it out there in a professional manner so it doesn't look any different or than a quote-unquote professional published book. And that's the key. The people that have self-published that have done well are those who have proceeded as though it is a business. It's not a hobby. It's a business, and they take it seriously and treat it that way.
Well, I think that anything that you do, it can always form into a business. And,
absolutely.
And it's like, you can look at how podcasts are, look at how everything is. I mean, doing a comic strip in a newspaper, that used to be massively difficult to publish. I remember trying. It was impossible, and I'm going to talk back to the 90s when I tried to do it. You had to go to an independent, small little throw-around newspaper. The big ones would never touch you. You already had to be established.
Break into a syndication in order to get into the big guys, sure.
And it was difficult. Nowadays, you can just publish your stuff online and find an audience, which is
and you could
weird.
publish a book. You could publish a book of comics. With the e-readers today and the print, the POD possibilities, that's something that you could do. There are a lot of the graphic novels are very, very popular. So that's another way. If it's cartoon strips or if it's graphic novels or whatever it is. I mean that's a big deal now, and it's going in all these different directions. So it's wide open for those that have the imagination and the determination to do it.
And being a parent of almost 10-year-old, I look at her all the time and go, you don't realize how much you have at your fingertips, opposed to when we were kids. We didn't have any of it. I mean, I always tell her, if we go to a movie store, like we have Family Video here, which is equivalent to what a Blockbuster used to be like.
Oh, right.
I still, to this day, love walking into a video store because I want to touch them. And I think the same thing applies to books. When we go to the library, every 2 weeks we're at the library, and I want her to be able to physically touch the book, be able to have that in your hands. Yes, we can look at everything on our phone. That's great and all, but the physical touch, that's what matters. That's what we're losing. And then I'm going to sound like an old man going, back in my day, we actually held books. But in truth, it's one of those things. It is important. I mean, it's great that we can have them all in the cloud and take this library with us everywhere. But it's so nice to be able to just touch a book and turn a page.
That's a luxury.
Yeah.
I think print books are going to, and the hardcovers especially, are going to become luxury items. I just had several of my books produced in hardcover in time for the holiday season. And as gifts, it's beautiful, especially for nonfiction. There's something about having a physical book for a nonfiction title that you can earmark and put Post-it notes up in and mark the places that you can flip to very, very quickly. But really today, I mean, writing is writing. Books are books, and the delivery system has changed. I mean, we used to have paste up at the newspapers, you know, the movable type, and before that, only the wealthy could afford a book before that because books were handwritten. So technology has even leveled the playing field, so everybody has the opportunity to read widely and read pretty much anything that they want. So, you know, to me, that's wonderful, and I don't discriminate between the delivery system. So, I mean, my books are in print, they're in hardcover, they're in all ebook platforms from Kindle to Nook to iBooks. I do audiobooks. That's a big growing field because people are busy. They're multitasking while I'm cooking dinner or I'm driving, I'm commuting to my job. I can listen to an audiobook.
Mm-hmm.
And otherwise people might not be able to read, and that would be awful. That would be awful.
And see, that's, you know, it's funny because your impression on books is the same way as I do. I'm right there. I think that there's definitely a place for it. It was kind of down to, and you would be one person who would understand this one and appreciate this. Back in the day, and I mean, I'm talking 50, 60, 70 years ago, if you went over to someone's house and they had a large library of books, they were scholars and they were wealthy and it was just, oh my gosh. Now, fast forward to today, you go to somebody's house, me included, I'm going to put myself in this one. Instead of having that library of books, it's DVDs and video games and retro games. That took the place of the actual novel, which makes me feel a little bit bad because I'm like, a book is iconic. It's so much. It's a world that we will never be able to go to. You know, for example, Harry Potter, or, you know, even go down to your thriller books. These are worlds that are existing in our imagination that people like you are able to bring us to. And yet we're not displaying them the same way that we would a DVD or a video game. And I feel guilty to that.
Well, you know, it took me a long time to come around to saying ebooks and self-publishing was okay because it took me forever to get an agent and then to get a real publishing deal, and that was a huge, big deal. But today, publishing companies have shrunk. They're not. They've kind of eaten each other alive. So when I first started out, there were probably 30 or 40 separate publishers you could submit to. Now there's maybe 3 to 5 because they own each other. They own all of those imprints. So you compete if you submit something and it's similar to a book that they already have in-house that's going to be coming out later, you get turned down. Mm-hmm. Whereas with self-publishing, you can bring it out. So to me, it's not the physical part of the book that's important. It's that esoteric ability to share the story.
Right.
And as I said, different people digest stories in different ways. Some are very visual, some are very tactile, and others are very, they want the audible experience, the audio experience, and some all of the above. I mean, I know people, even back in the day when magazines were the thing to have, you'd walk into their house, they didn't have a magazine in the place, they didn't have any books. Mm-hmm. Today, if I walk into somebody's house and you don't see any magazines or books, doesn't necessarily mean they're not readers.
Right.
They're still literate. They're still engaged. They may be on their phone, reading at the checkout at the grocery store, reading, the news of the day, or reading an iBook. Mm-hmm. And so it's become easier to be literate. And it's not as expensive either. I mean, with all of these different plans that are available. It's almost like library, that you don't have to buy the books. You can rent or lease the books in a lot of these ebook plans that are available. So you can do it that way. I still love physical books. I have 4 floor-to-ceiling bookcases in my office upstairs. They're all full. And then I have stacks on the floor in front of them. In my husband's office down the hall, same thing with him. And when we moved, it took us 3 trips to bring all the books. You know, and I donate books to the library sale constantly. I go to a writer's conference. I bring back sackloads of free books because every author out there is giving away books to help support other readers, other writers, and to get, you know, eyeballs on their book for reviews. So there's lots and lots of books out there, and if you treasure physical books, that's wonderful. Instill that in your children. But don't begrudge having the electronic versions too, because if they don't have the wherewithal to pick up that big heavy book and take it with them everywhere, they could be reading, you know, with their whatever their e-reader device is, you know, on the school bus on the way to school.
Right. Well, I mean, the first thing we got our daughter, and I think she was 6 at the time, we bought her a Nook. Because, I mean, what a kid's not going to be able to appreciate an actual physical book. Not at that age, at least. That'll be a coloring book to a child that age. But, you know, I've never been a naysayer when it comes to any kind of e-readers or any kind of e-books. Personally, you know, we were even talking before we actually started recording. All of my books I typically end up picking up are audio. But that's because, yeah, I love audiobooks. And the only reason why I do audio is I'm always doing something. So that downtime, I don't have it. So I'm always saying, you know what, if there's a great book out there, always, it's the same thing. I gotta hear this book, which, again, I feel like it's cheating. But, you know, well, I digest it the same way as if I was reading.
Yeah. Oh, sure.
It's just I might have to put it on in the car. I may have a dog where I'm working on a dog and I'm listening to that book. So those are times where I'll digest a great deal of knowledge, and I love it. So,
oh yeah,
I mean,
it's great for multitasking.
Oh yeah, and you know, again, let's go back. You know, I always like to revert back to the early stage, and that is, you know, go back to the 90s. We didn't have these luxuries. I mean, if you could find something on cassette, that was a whoa. So I love the technology, obviously. I just always kind of feel a little, you know, sad that some of the other form is going away.
I do too. But, you know, I don't think it's ever going to really go away because there are people like you and I that are passionate about those things. And they will be... There may be special editions. They may not bring out as many books in hardcover first. And ebooks may become the new mid-list, the new paperbacks, and the hardcovers be the front list, you know, unless you are, you know, self-publishing and you can do that yourself. So what's wonderful is there's no one choice fits all anymore. Right. You can pick and do whatever you want. They used to have, you know, the books on tape. And they would be on CDs and discs, and I've got a couple of those, and they're like, you know, 14 discs to listen to, you know, swap out as you go on your car trip. And those were great, but you know, the audio ones now, you don't have to worry about that. It's seamless. So it's nice to have those options, and you know, as a in another life, I'm an actor, and I have my own recording studio in the house, so I do my own audiobooks for the thrillers and for the nonfiction. Which
I think is cool. Now, let's go into the...
Also, I'm cheap. I don't want to pay anybody else, so I'll be honest there.
I produce my own stuff. I wouldn't really want to go to somebody else's place, and that's just... I guess that's more the comfort zone. You know, and I will dive into audiobooks and the recording in a moment because, of course, doing this is, of course, a personal type touch and enjoyment. But the Thriller box set. Now, everything you've done pretty much is all in one neat area. It's all fact. This, you went completely in another direction, and I thought that was kind of cool. That's another reason why I was like, I can see where you could transition to, whether it's put your own life experiences into these stories with your shepherd, with your cat, bring them into it. I can see that because your 3 books, Lost and Found, Hide and Seek, and Show and Tell, which I love the titles. I just thought they were the greatest. How did that whole process start? What was the aha, I'm going to do this kind of moment? How did that begin?
Oh gosh, well, it was part of it was when I first started writing, I wanted to write fiction, and I couldn't get anybody. I couldn't get any agent or publisher to look at it. And so one of the agents that I had approached about my fiction said, "No, I'm not really interested in this, but with your background, if you ever want to do nonfiction, let me know." And she became my agent for the nonfiction. And then I became so busy with that. I was doing 1 to 3 books a year there for a while. I was working on several nonfiction books at a time. And then the bottom fell out, and publishing changed, and the nonfiction books were not selling. And so I thought, well, I'm not busy now. I'm going to start working on some fiction, and had started work on one, and the agent sent out some pages on it, and nobody was interested. They just were not interested. And so I stepped back, and I left that agent. I loved her. We parted amicably, and found another agent at Thriller Fest, actually. International Thriller Writers is a wonderful organization. And I attended one of their conferences and met another agent, and she was sure that she could sell my nonfiction and was interested in some of the fiction. She didn't like what I had to show her, but she said, maybe something a little different. And so I started the story Lost and Found. We ended up it didn't work out with her, but I ended up working on that story for several years, and only finished it when I was in the middle of teaching high school choir and very frustrated and not sure what I was going to do, and sure that teaching was not something that I wanted to do the rest of my life, but oh my gosh, publishing is over for me. How am I going to move forward? And so I finished the book. I finished the story on my laptop in my car before teaching school every morning for a semester. And once it was finished, I submitted it to a contest, and it won second place. And the judge had some really, really good comments on it. Meanwhile, I had just started working with a small publisher, a small press, to bring back my out-of-print nonfiction titles into ebooks, and I didn't know how to do it, so they were helping me with that. And I approached my editor there, and I said, "Listen, I have this finished thriller novel, and may I submit it to you?" And she said, "Sure." And I sent it to her, and I didn't realize this at the time. She had been the judge in the contest that gave me the second place win, so she already knew the book.
Nice.
And it came out, we went through the editing process, brought it out, and it was just going to be a standalone book. I just wanted to prove to myself I could have a novel published. And it was so successful. Because of my affiliation with Thriller Fest, I became part of the debut author program, where they do this big gala breakfast at their annual conference, and you get to talk about your first novel and what it means to you, and in front of this huge room full of very well-known, very famous authors and agents and everything. And it was life-changing, and it was so unexpected, so well-received that the people that were reviewing it were saying, well, what happens next? Well, what happens next? What about where's she going to go from here? There were all of these clues about her past life, but you never said what had happened to her, that she has, my main character is an animal behaviorist, and she has PTSD. But in the first book, you don't know what caused it. There are a number of kind of hints, but because that wasn't the main story for that one. So I said, okay, well, I need to write the next one, and that will explain why she is the way she is. And then that led to the third one. But what I really wanted to do, and interrupt me if you need to. I'm just
No, keep going.
I had read stories with animal viewpoint before, and honestly, a lot of them were really badly done. And as an animal behavior consultant, this is kind of my passion. This is what I do. I wanted to write a character from the animal's viewpoint that did not talk, that was not a kid's character, but that looked at life and reacted in a way that I believed, that I fantasized a dog really would. Mm-hmm. And so my main character is an animal behaviorist. She has trained this German Shepherd. It's a pup. He's about 9 months old in the first book. He's being trained to be a service dog to her autistic nephew. And I had no idea how to write a child's autistic viewpoint. And so whenever the chapter comes where the little boy and the dog are together, I wrote it in the dog's viewpoint. And people loved it, and I loved it. Those were the best. I would actually cry sometimes when I was writing this because it was so moving to me, and I think people got that. Now, there are flaws in the book. It was my first novel that I would fix if I could, but they're kind of embedded in the story. So that is the way it stands. The second book is I think much better. It's a better plotted story, but I love thrillers, I love medical thrillers, and I wanted to bring the animal viewpoint and pet-centric themes into that. So the first one is Lost and Found, that deals with PTSD and service dogs for autistic children. And the second one, again, deals with the PTSD and her service dog, but it also deals with themes of dog fighting, which is a horrific situation. And so I talk some about that. And then the third one is kind of comes full circle, because I had some reviewers with the first book that didn't like the bad guy, and they said, why can't autistic people sometimes be heroes? And I said, you're right. You're right. So the third book, the autistic children that are victims in the first book are the heroes in the third book.
Very good. Very good. That's a very good decision. And it's something I would have alluded, but you listened. Where a lot of people would not have listened. They would have said, no, this is how I'm going to write it. This is my story. And yet you engaged, and you're like, you know what? You're right. That is very.
It's the reader's story too. I mean,
right.
Once it's published, it's no longer mine; it's theirs, and they get. And I do contest. I do what's called Name That Dog or Name That Cat contest. So my readers get to choose the names of the hero animals that are going to be in the next story, and they vote on it, and they do a campaign, and whichever one wins, and you will see in the back of the book, I do a section called Fact or Fiction, and explain what in the book I made up and what is actually based on fact. And then I also acknowledge the people that got to name the hero pets in that book, and that's great fun because I want my readers to feel like they have some say in this too. So I'm working on the fourth one is called Hit and Run.
Nice. I was going to ask that question. I was going to say, okay, can you tell me what the next one's called?
I can't tell you what it's about yet, but yeah.
Right. But no, that I can accept. I can accept that you can't tell me what it's about, but Hit and Run. Now, okay, curiosity. When are you projected to actually have it out?
I was hoping for that it would already be out, but I kind of got sidetracked. I also write novellas for Lay Crime Kindle World, and I had my third in a trilogy of novellas came out 2 weeks ago, I think. And it's a dog viewpoint thriller, but they're short, about 20,000 words each, and there are three of them, and they first one is called Born to Love, and the second one is Trained to Serve, and the third is Called to Protect. And they're set in North Texas again, and it's a dog trainer who is training a Rottweiler puppy to become a police dog. And so the viewpoints alternate between the trainer and the Rottweiler puppy who grows up through the process. And this is the three novellas are a prequel to Toby Neal's Lay Crime Lay Crime thrillers that are set in Hawaii, and her main character has a Rottweiler police dog. So this is how the dog got to Hawaii. So that's a lot of fun. So, but you're asking when the next one is going to come out. So I'm in the midst of plotting it, and so I'm hoping probably by the middle of the summer or late summer it should be out.
So that what's great is that it's June when we release. Actually, it's May. I'm sorry. I'm already ahead of myself. It's May, so it's really soon. That's the best way of putting that.
Well, and what's fun is because the three Lost and Found, Hide and Seek, and Show and Tell take place within weeks of each other. And so I had somebody ask me, why do you do that? And I said, because I don't want the dog to age out too quickly. I mean, if you have a main character and then the next book is a year later and then or 2 years later, the dog, he starts out as 9 months old. And then that's in the first book. And then the second book, he's about a year old. And in the third book, he's about a year and 4 months old. So it's it's pretty short in between the spans. The only thing is, I have to give him a break because I've been putting him through hell. But that's what you do with a thriller.
But what's funny is that you're thinking about this responsibly. You're thinking about it in a duration period. Okay, am I going to accelerate my character's life expectancy? And being a dog, you're thinking, okay, 15 years, guesstimation. Right. So if this is 1 year and then we take a year off or 2 years, the storyline, it's just going to run through. So that made sense. I totally get that. Now, let's go into some of your other work. Now, again, I was doing my research and I was going, wow. I wrote down a few of them. Compatibility, multi-cat household, which I thought that was really smart for actually diving into a multi-cat house and actually going into behavior. I thought that was great. Very, very seldom do you really see a lot of cat books out there or cat discussions. So I love that you went down that way. You have complete puppy care, cat facts, which I thought again, as you can see, I love cats. I love dogs. I don't know where I go with it. The complete kin care, dog facts, new choices in natural healing for pups. Did I even see something where it was chicken soup for the soul? You did something as well in that forum?
Yeah. My friend, Dr. Marty Becker was, he had been working with chicken soup for quite a while and had done, chicken soup for the pet lovers soul, and it was a huge hit.
I remember that.
And they wanted 2 more books but one specific to dogs and one specific to cats. And so he called me because at the time I was president of the Cat Writers Association, which, by the way, you need to join. We'll talk about that later. And he and Carol Klein and I, and she had done a lot of work with Chicken Soup also, we were co-editors of Chicken Soup for the Dog Lover Soul and Chicken Soup for the Cat Lover Soul. And I credit Marty and Carol for helping me learn even better how to structure fiction and an emotional response in the writing. Now, those are all nonfiction books, but they have a very specific way of structuring these short stories, and they are very, very short personal experience stories, so that every one of them resonates in some way and strikes an emotional chord. And that really helped me then with my writing when I started doing fiction. And even some of my nonfiction books, for instance, I've got Complete Care for Your Aging Cat, Complete Care for Your Aging Dog. And so there's all of the technical stuff, how do you do nursing care with an old cat. And then there's a personal experience story from an actual pet owner and his or her cat, and how they learned how to do subcutaneous fluids for their aging cat. So each one of those chapters will have what I used to call put a furry face on it. So here's an example of how this person learned to give insulin injections, so that they could help their furry wonder live fully into their golden years. So yeah, I love doing the Chicken Soup stuff.
I again, we actually kind of went back and forth a couple times before we even started recording. I was just like, research on you is so much fun. It was almost kind of like, you know what, can we just postpone the actual interview? I'm enjoying this part, but I realized just kind of like writing a book, that there's a little shorter in duration, but you don't have as much time to prep and not as much time to actually build the book as an episode. But man, you've covered it from so many angles, and I loved it. I was like, I don't know where to start. I love the fact that you went for the thriller. I love that you went down that direction, and in a sense, kind of was your guilty pleasure, something that you had really wanted to do, and yet you did it, and you succeeded, and that alone is just, mind-boggling. Just, for all the people out there who are listening who are like, I just want to write a book, and I don't even know where to start. Here's an example of somebody who actually wrote a book and a book and a book, and you've continuously created so much literature, and it's sometimes a little bit crazy to think about all of the books that you've been part of. I was just like, I can't write it all down. It was that good.
Doorstop.
I would think in a sense you would, yeah.
Well, and the thing is, for those who are listening that have aspirations to write, looking at, every time, it was so exciting when I had my agent and she would get me a contract, and I'd sign the contract and send it off, and I was so excited, and then I'd sit down and go, oh no, now I have to actually do it. And it's very daunting to think of having to produce this, 60, 80, 110,000 words and have that finished and everything. You can't look at it that way. You have to look at it from a chapter at a time or a section at a time. I had one when I was writing. I did 2 books with Rodale Press. I had a couple of brilliant editors there, and I had to write chapters and turn them in every week. And so by the time over a period of about 5 months, all of the chapters had already been turned in and had been edited, and he'd send them back to me for correction while I was writing the next one. It was the most intense thing I've ever done. But the books were done then, and we didn't have to go back and edit. And it was a great discipline also. So if you're thinking about writing, don't let it overwhelm you. If you sit down before you have coffee in the morning, before you start your real job, before you have to send the kids haven't gotten up to go to school, you sit down and you write one page and you spew it out and you allow yourself to write garbage. Write garbage. By the end of 365 days, you have 365 pages of prose, and I guarantee not all of it is garbage. Some of it is absolute diamonds, and then you have something you can go back and you can edit. Mm-hmm. The first draft for me is horrific. It's awful. It's painful, and I have to give myself permission. Okay, this is going to suck. Just do it. And then you get to go back and edit, and for me, editing is fun. And then I get to rearrange, and I get, these days I give myself permission to write the fun stuff first, which is all the dog viewpoint stuff. And then I just fill in all I've got the dog does this here, and then he does this over here, and then so in between, we have to get him from here to here, so I'll write this, And so give yourself incentives. I can't have my coffee until I finish my one page. Or I get jelly beans after I finish this chapter. Give yourself incentives. I mean, bribes are legal.
They are, yeah, especially when you're bribing yourself.
Yes, exactly.
I can't do it before coffee. My creativity, it's like, no, give me the coffee. Sorry. Now, I'm going to take a little bit of a detour because it's what I do, and ADD and ooh, shiny red ball. But you decided, you know what, I've mastered this universe. I'm going to go and try my hand in podcasting, which is a realm of its own, as you very well know.
Oh, yeah.
You did a show called Pet Peeves, which is funny because I used to do a segment which was Pet Peeves, things that would just drive me insane, which in my world is dry kibble. Still, to this day, don't even start me. I've got 200 and some episodes. We can go back. You can listen to all the Pet Peeves on that. But you went down that direction. What was that like? Why did you stop? And just kind of take us through that process.
Oh, well, a friend of mine, and you can still go over to PetLifeRadio.com and find all of the Pet Peeves segments on there. They were half-hour podcasts. Well, sometimes they went a little longer than that. And they were all, the topics ranged cats, dogs to, we had basketball playing goldfish, we had, all kinds of things. And the theme was what hisses you off or makes you howl about pets. And so it was a wide-ranging thing, and I would have experts on, I would have authors with new books on, and it was just a lot of fun, just to do like what we're doing now, just to talk about the passions that people have with their pets. And I had a ball doing it. I did it for, I think there's 80 or 90 segments on there, and we did them weekly for quite some time. And frankly, I just got really too busy because I was having to write the nonfiction and then do the fiction also. I've written a weekly newspaper column for many, many years. I do that. I do a TV segment here locally, and it just got to be a little too much. And the podcast, what's nice about the internet is they're going to stay up there forever. And I may transcribe and turn them into books down the road too. But I got to interview Betty White.
Oh, you're lucky.
I know. She's absolutely spectacular lady. She's my hero. I was at Western Veterinary Conference, and she was there with Morris Animal Foundation, which is another one of my brilliant organization. I got to interview people, Dr. Susan Little, who is a brilliant feline veterinary specialist out of Canada, and at the time was the president of the Wynn Feline Foundation that does outstanding work on behalf of cats. Interviewed folks at the Canine Health Foundation, AKC, breed-specific legislation we talked about. All kinds of things. So it was a great experience. And this was interesting. I even, because I had met a lot of my hero thriller authors at Thriller Fest, I interviewed some of them about their books.
Mm-hmm.
James Rollins is one of my heroes as far as thriller writers go. He's a best-selling author. He gave me a book cover quote for my first book that made me cry, still does to this day, because I had met him, I had interviewed him about his book, Altar of Eden, I think was the one at the time, because he is a veterinarian. But I had asked him, well, why don't you put animals or veterinarian characters in it? He said, well, that's my day job. So I want to write, adventure stuff, other things. And then later down the road, as I was getting ready to release my first thriller with a dog viewpoint, he had written a book with a dog viewpoint character in it, a war dog. And so it was so neat to say, see, I told you so. There's a best-selling author that's doing this. See this, and other people I got to interview. So it was wonderful because, as you know, you dial somebody up and you say, I've got a radio podcast and I'd like to interview you. People are flattered. I was flattered when you asked me. So it's a great way to meet people, and it's a nice way to kind of get to know the person behind the name.
Yeah.
Oftentimes you don't otherwise, you see the name on book covers or you see the name on research journals and stuff. But a lot of people don't get a chance to actually meet them in person.
Mm-hmm.
And so this is kind of the next best thing. So, yeah, I did it for quite a while. I love doing it. I'd love to do it again sometime if my schedule ever opens. I don't know if it will. As I told you, I've got more ideas to write than I probably have 9 lives. So.
But it was still a good experience. And, it's funny because I always have, and of course I'm on this end of it, but I always feel weird whenever I send a message out to somebody or contact somebody. I'm always like, want to do my podcast? And I don't know why that always goes in my head, but I kind of feel like, it's the 1960s, I'm in a treehouse, and I'm like, you want to do my podcast? I don't know why, and it's, I guess, I have no problem saying it publicly. I'm like, I find it to be a very strange medium, and I still do. I've talked to great people like yourself, but I still go, want to do my podcast?
But you know what? I think that's the insecure artist in all of us. I still feel like, for years, I would have had, half a dozen books published, and I still felt like an imposter waiting for somebody to find out that I shouldn't really belong to this club. There was a mistake. You're not worthy. And I think we all have that feeling. And as artists, we all kind of chose professions where we're in the public eye and people judge us.
Right.
So they're going to judge me on what I have written. If they meet me in person and they hear me speak, they're going to judge me on that presentation. So I'm very conscious of being, a public figure in some ways, not to the extent that the high echelon my heroes are, but at the same time, I'm very, very conscious of representing myself as a professional and as a human being and as a compassionate person on behalf of the animals that I represent, because I think that's my passion. That's why I was put on earth, was to be a voice for the cats and dogs.
Yeah, you definitely can definitely be the voice for the voiceless. I always like to say that that's what this was, but you've definitely exceeded. I'm more or less the voice for kind of the quiet ones. You are the one that actually do it, so I'll surrender that.
Well, I tell you what, it's not me alone. There are many, many that came before me that I wouldn't be here if not for them, and there are so many that join me, you among them, and it's raising our voices together is how we're heard. There's no single voice that can do it all. So
True.
Congratulations to you as well. This has been a wonderful, wonderful interview, and you don't sell yourself short. This is great.
I always just exactly the same way you are. It's like I'm you do feel in this sense like an imposter. There's great people out there who do great stuff, and like, again, I'll repeat myself. Will I do my podcast? Kind of moment. It's you don't really feel like. I personally look at it this way. I don't think of anything that we do here as this. Oh my gosh! But then I look at people who do, and I'm not even mentioning names, but people who have made great productions, and they just think they're so great, and yet, probably not that great. But openly I'll say it. You had a good idea. You probably stole most of it, and yet you think that you're the greatest thing on earth. Where people like you and people like me who make art, it's we're humble, and I do actually try to stay there. I definitely stay in the humble role.
Oh yeah, I'm so humble. I'm wonderful.
You are okay. I will even mention it, man. When we first called up, and your hello voice is not the standard. I'm at this plateau. You are the most pleasant, and I was completely thrown off. So I have to throw that out there because it was just like one of those moments of, this is not what I expected. I don't know what I expected, but humility is definitely there. So I give you that. I love it.
Oh, well, thank you. I've had enough coffee today, so I'm cool.
Oh, good. Well, I have two. It's Friday. What can I say?
Yeah, it is Friday. Yes, I've got one event tomorrow, and then I've got the weekend off, which will be nice.
This is the first weekend I've had off, and I don't even know how long. So I am just dancing on sunshine. Let's dive into audiobooks. What's great about this podcast is we can go longer than the typical 30 minutes. And a lot of people are like, no, cut it down to 30 minutes. You can't get to know somebody in 30 minutes. That's been my take. So there are some episodes that are, and they worked out great, but you're interesting, and I'm just not ready to cut tape here. So recording audiobooks, because you had mentioned it, and I love that concept. Obviously you can take a little bit away from podcasting, so that gave you kind of an idea of how to do everything. But walk us through that process. I've always been interested.
Well, again, in today's self-publishing market, there are new tools available to independent publishers. And after I had brought a number of my out-of-print books back to life through e-books and reissuing them and updating them, I decided Amazon has a program called the Audible program, and they have a publishing arm called acx.com. So A and then C as in cat, X.com. And independent publishers can go there and audition voice artists to read their book and record it. And it's a free service. Now, the voice artists, you need to pay them or make an arrangement, a royalty arrangement of some kind. So this platform was available to use, and I thought, well, I've been an actor and done voiceover work for a number of years, and it's quite expensive to pay a professional to record your book.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it can be several $1,000s to do that, and it's worth it because I've done it myself, and I know these people are worth it. But I thought, I've kind of got the skills, at least I know I do for the nonfiction. And rather than investing the $3,000 or $4,000 and paying another VO artist, why don't I set up my own studio? And so I did that. And they even have a recommendation for some of the equipment, the professional equipment. And I already had a lot of professional music writing software, and so I went to that same company and purchased the equipment that I needed and the sound foam and set up my walk-in closet in my office, and I've got everything set up in there. And the first audiobook that I recorded was my complete kitten care book. And it's interesting with this book because it was almost the book that didn't happen. This was when I was still with my agent, and I was working on 2 other books at the time, and I got an offer to write Kittens for Dummies. And I was too busy. And I said, yeah, I'm just too busy. And my agent said, yeah, but you've got all the material. You don't have to write anything new. You can do this in your sleep. Never say no to an offer. Okay. So I put it together, and I did due diligence, and I sent the book in, and it was a work for hire, which basically means the Dummies company would own the copyright. It would be a one-time pay. I wouldn't get any royalties on it. But my agent was right. I had all the information. It wasn't any heavy research. And so I put the book together, and I sent it in. And the editor, and I knew the editor. She's a friend of mine. And she accepted the book, which meant that I was very shortly was going to get paid my advance, and it would be done. And then I got an email from her like 2 weeks later saying, I'm very sorry to inform you, but the Dummies company has been sold to someone else, and your book has been canceled. And I could have gotten mad, but I read contracts really, really carefully. And she had already accepted the manuscript, and that meant she owed me the money. Plus, they were going to revert the rights on the book so that the rights came back to me, which meant the book didn't get published, but I got the book back, and I got paid for it.
Nice.
So I got all of that back, and then I turned around, and one of the books, I was working on the 2 aging pet books at the time with New American Library. And so I had my agent ask the editor, Amy has this complete book about kittens that's ready to go, needs to be reformatted, but would you be interested? She said yes, and so I sold it again to New American Library. Different title, different format, but it was that book. And then when it went out of print, that's the first one that I brought back, and I've revised it several times. It's my best-selling book, and this is a book that should never have happened. And so I brought it out in audio, and it's like in its 6th incarnation. It's got new pictures. It's got all kinds of. It won several awards. So I like to hold that up to people as an example. You never know what's going to happen. The book that you wrote 10 years ago that's collecting dust under the bed may be tomorrow's bestseller. So yeah. Anyway, I've done the audio books. I now have, I think, 5 audiobooks out, and they're very time-intensive to do, so I've got a list of about 7 more that I need to do. I just haven't had time yet to. I did the New Choices in Natural Healing for Dogs and Cats was the latest one that I had come out, but I've got the kitten book, I've got compatibility for dogs, compatibility for cats, the Natural Healing book, and the first 2 of the thrillers. So I've got a bunch more that I still need to do.
I think it's just amazing. I mean, I've had a blast. I've had a blast just being able to get to know you. I guess we all look at authors and we only can see your words in print, whether it's audio or not audio, but ebook or physical. But we never really get to have these conversations, and I love them because it's so cool to be able just to get into your brain for a little bit. It's been fun.
And that tickles.
I get that. Now, what did we not cover during all of this? I mean, I know we've covered a lot, but what is it that we've left out?
Oh gosh. Well, okay. I will tell you something. And I mentioned it earlier. And I know you're aware of the Dog Writers Association, correct?
I've heard of it. Yeah.
Okay. You, as a podcaster and talking about animal issues, you really need to look into becoming a member of Dog Writers Association of America. They also have members around the world as well. But Dog Writers has been around for 95 years, 100 years, something. I mean, they've been around a long time. They started out as the sports reporters who covered dog shows. And it's evolved. It's a great organization. They had been around about 70 years, I think, when I questioned, well, there's dog writers. Why isn't there a cat writers association? So around 22 years ago now, I think it is, there were a group of us that started the Cat Writers Association, and that's another organization you need to look at. You can go to catwriters.com. We're having our annual Writers Conference in Houston in June, and you don't have to be a member to attend. So we're going to have speakers on all kinds of publishing, including, I would hope, recording and podcasting and all kinds of things. But this is the kicker. We're holding it in conjunction with a big cat show. So you get to go see kitties too, which is always fun.
That is one of my favorite things. I always say it, I love giving cats a bath whenever a cat comes in for a groom. That's one of my favorites because I just love cats. But I love dogs. I'm kind of torn here. That's the whole thing. I just always think to myself, a writer is a writer. A writer is a writer, yes, absolutely. And I tell people ask me which is your favorite. I said, don't ask me to choose a favorite child. I mean, I'm an equal opportunity pet lover. That's it. Right. I love both, but it's like I always think to myself, a writer, I mean, way, way, way above a podcaster. I mean.
Oh, heck no.
I do. Really?
No, we have members that are photographers, they blog, or they write articles, or they are artists. We have illustrators, PR professionals. Writer is a writer. You are communicating.
True.
It probably, rather than saying cat writer, it should be cat communicators association to bring us up to date. But yeah, absolutely, you would qualify for membership. There's a couple of different. There's a professional level and an associate level, and you can just look at the definitions there on the website. And listeners, you do it too, because it's a great opportunity if you're interested in becoming a writer. As we said here, writing is writing. Even if you're not writing about cats or dogs, there is something there that is going to help you with whatever you want to do, podcasting or blogging or writing poetry. We have award-winning poets in the organization. So, yeah, look us up.
Well, you know what I'm going to do as soon as I'm off the phone. You just know.
Yes.
Well, I really have enjoyed myself, and I hope that you come back and you tell us more about everything that's going to go on, whether it's hit and run or whatever you're doing.
I'll let you know when the next thriller comes out.
And you know I'm going to be right here going, well, let's talk about it.
Okay, thank you so much.
Well, and thank you, Amy. And, well, this is this week's episode of the podcast. Have a pet-tastic week. Bye-bye, everybody.
Okay, gotta go in my bedtime.